Okay, sounds good.
Alrighty, ready to go?
Yep, all set.
Alrighty, so what was your childhood like?
So I grew up in Connecticut, a very small rural town. I had, my two parents and my sister. It was a, pretty good childhood. We were a close family. My parents always supported me through everything. I was involved in a lot of activities as a child. Stuff like music, theater, anything that had to do with music or acting, I absolutely loved. And my parents always went to all my events, and my sister was involved in a lot of that stuff too. So we kind of did it together, and we're less than 2 years apart. So we grew up pretty close.
Do you still
Um,
do music?
so a little bit, not as much as I would like to. It's more, kind of a recreational hobby at this point.
Nice. What instrument?
So I play the fife. I played the clarinet and bass clarinet and piano in the
What
past.
is a fife? I've never
A
heard of
fife,
that.
yeah. So a fife is kind of like a flute or a piccolo, but it only has like six holes in it.
Okay.
So I was actually in a fife and drum corps when I was a teen, preteen and teenage years. So that's kind of where I picked up that. So I don't play as much as I used to, but I do sing. I like to do a lot of singing, but once again, it's
Nice.
more like recreational
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah. So that's always been a part of my life. And also growing up, I was brought up Catholic. So I went to Catholic school all the way through college, all Catholic school. Um, so, this is kind of the interesting part of my story is that, my rape involved someone I didn't go to high school with, but was around my age who was from my hometown.
Hmm.
So, we actually didn't meet until I was in college. And I had a I had a friend in college who was from Connecticut as well, who I knew from high school. And so she actually met him first. And then while we were in college, she was like, "Oh yeah, do you know this guy? He's from your town." And I was like, "Well, no. I mean, I'm like, I think I heard his name, but I don't really know him." So she kind of introduced us, and that's how we got to know each other. And in the beginning, we were just friends. I knew my friend kind of had a little crush on him, so I was like, well, hands off here,
Hmm.
So, but I did like him, from the beginning. There was just something about him that I really liked. And, we were really good friends in the beginning. And, over time, our mutual friend, we actually, each of us kind of had a falling out, with her, completely separate, unrelated, to each other, but we remained in contact. And I would say probably about 6 months into the friendship was when it turned more romantic. And it wasn't like the traditional, oh, he takes me on a date, we go to dinner or the movies. It was more like we'd hang out with friends, and afterwards everyone would leave, and we'd hang out and really kind of connect on a just one on one. And that kind of
Hmm.
led more of a romantic type relationship. And so we were involved, but even though I really liked him a lot, I kind of felt that he didn't feel the same way about me, like as deeply as I did. So, I just kind of looked at it as more of a casual type, relationship, rather than like a, steady type thing, like we weren't dating, it wasn't to the point where we weren't dating other people. I mean, I wasn't really dating other people because I liked him that much, but I wasn't really sure if he was or not. And I never really asked because I just felt that it was more of a casual relationship. And I
Hmm.
could tell he just didn't feel the same way about me as I did with him. So, because of that, I always kind of wanted to keep things, um, you know, light and not too serious, so I didn't want to, um, get too sexually involved with him. I mean, we'd kiss and, mild stuff like that. But you know, never involved, you know, sex or anything like that. So we started, you know, getting involved a little bit more romantically. And, you know, he went to college out of state. And I did too, but, you know, I went to college in Massachusetts, so it was a little closer, but he was, you know, hundreds, you know, probably thousands miles away for college. So, you know, as our, you know, during breaks and stuff, we'd always be together, hanging out, you know, spending time with each other. And then, you know, when it was time to go back to school, we go back to school. And so probably about a, yeah, I think it was a year after I had met him, um, he invited me to go visit him at his college during one of my breaks, because I think my winter break was at a different time than his. So I went down for a few days to visit him, and that's when the rape happened. We he was a part of a fraternity, and so the night before I left, he held a going away party for me. Kind of ironic thinking of it now, but um so you know, there was, you know, some drinking involved, you know, but it was all, you know, in the apartment, and you know, we were all having a good time and everything. And then, you know, people started leaving, and it was just him and me at that point. And so you know, I knew I'd been drinking, but I didn't feel drunk. I really felt, you know, completely aware of everything. And you know, we started kissing, and then, you know, I had this weird feeling, and I stopped and I said, look, I said, just so you know, I do not want to have sex with you. And he goes, no. And I said, no, I don't. And he was like, okay. And so then he kissed me again. So, you know, we kept kissing, and I'm thinking, okay, you know, I made myself clear. He knows I don't want to have sex with him. Um, the next thing I remember was pushing him off of me and running out of the room and into the bathroom, closing the door and locking it, and looking into the mirror and thinking, what just happened? And so, you know, from, you know, when it immediately happened, I didn't have a whole lot of memory of what happened. I knew something had happened. I knew it was probably something bad, but I couldn't remember much. You know, I'm like, I remember telling him I didn't want to have sex. I remember kissing him afterwards, but then the next thing I remember is, you know, pushing him off me and running out of the room. So I'm like, why am I missing this gap of time? You know, and at the time I thought, well, I've been drinking, so maybe it was the alcohol, maybe I blacked out, you know. And even though I try to convince myself that's what happened, a part of me knew that didn't make sense, because I was like, I remember everything about the night except for that period of time. You know, why would I not remember that one period of time? I remember everything before and everything after, and I didn't feel that drunk. And I was in my right mind to clearly state to him what I wanted and what I didn't want. So, you know, I stayed in the bathroom for a little while, trying to, you know, reach into my memory, what happened. And then when I realized I just couldn't remember, I came out of the bathroom, and I, you know, went into the bedroom that was designated for me, and I went to sleep. Um, I woke up the next morning, and I still couldn't remember anything, but I was like, something is not right about last night. Something happened, and I can't remember it, but I know something happened. And so then, you know, I was very confused at that point. So, you know, he drove me to the airport. I left. But when I got home, I talked to one of my friends, and I think she might have seen some red flags. You know, because she asked me straight out. She's like, "Did he force you?" And I was like, well, no. And I was like, well, I can't really remember everything, but no, you know. And I was saying no because I couldn't remember. And I was like, he wouldn't do that to me. You know, he wouldn't force me to do that, especially when I told him I didn't want to do that. So then, you know, I was trying to rationalize things. Well, you know, I was drunk, you know, I drank, you know, maybe I was drunk, maybe I changed my mind, you know. And once again, a part of me was like, I would not have changed my mind on this. I've always been very definite about, not wanting to take it to that level with him. So I was like, a part of me knew, but yeah, I was trying to convince myself. Um, so what I ended up actually doing was a few days later, I ended up contacting him because I was like, I thought, okay, look, there was only two people in that room. There was me and there was him. And, I can't remember what happened. So he's the only one that can fill in the blanks. So a couple days later, I contacted him and, you know, I I said, I think we might have had sex, but I don't really remember anything. And, I'm hoping, that you can fill in the blanks for me. And at that point, he told me he didn't remember anything and that he had blacked out too. I would later find out that that was not the truth, but at the time, that's what he told me. So then, once again, the rationalization started. Oh, well, if he doesn't remember and I don't remember, well, how can it be rape? You know?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm young, I don't know.
Hmm.
So, I kind of went on living my life, but shortly after that, um, well, actually, during that week, I once again, like I knew something wasn't quite right, and I was actually in a lot of physical pain. And I remember, you know, seeing the physical trauma that had happened, and thinking I would have never consented to this. I would have never wanted this. And I actually went to my college, like infirmary on campus, because I was having a hard time walking because of the trauma and the pain. And it was a nurse practitioner, I think, and she examined me, and then after she examined me, she started having kind of the rape, sexual assault conversation with me.
Hmm.
And I was kind of taken aback, and I was like, well, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? And, she's like, well, look, I can tell by your, by the exam, something traumatic happened here. And, she's like, you should really report it. And she goes, what, and then she asked me, she's like, what happened? And I said, well, look, I said, all I know is that I said I didn't want to have sex and somehow it happened. That's all I know. And so she kind of pressed me to report it, but I was so confused, and I was like, how am I going to report it if I have no memory of what happened?
And that's a
You know?
common thing is forgetting because your mind wants to just pretend it never happened.
Yeah, exactly. And it actually brings me back. There was this movie called Gothica. It came out in the early 2000s with Holly Berry. And there's a actor that plays a psychiatrist. And one of the quotes in the movie is he says at one point, the ability to repress is actually a vital survival tool.
Huh.
And I thought that that quote, really kind of hit the nail on the head, because
Yeah.
obviously at that time I was repressing for a reason. And
Hmm.
it must have been because I just couldn't deal with what actually happened.
Yeah, it's an automatic reaction.
Yeah. And I always thought, oh, I'm so strong, this will never happen to me. And if it did, I would report it right away. And I would never have loss of memory around it. And then when it actually happened to me, it was like, wow, just everything that I thought I would do in this situation is just blown out of the water.
Yeah, and I think definitely I've said that about other situations, like, and I feel like that's something pretty common. Like, well, I'd never do that, but you don't really know until you actually go through it.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. And so that was part of the reason why, I didn't report it at the time, because I'm like, well, what am I going to report? I can't
Hmm.
remember it. So, and then I was like, no one's going to believe me, even if I suspect that this happened to me. No one's going to believe it. So, um, and it was just very confusing at the time. So, and then I don't know, maybe a month, I guess, after that, I started getting really sick, like fever, chills. I kept having recurrent strep throat. And at that point, they actually had, they had tested me multiple times for mono, and it kept coming back negative. And they, at that point, thought I might have had HIV. And and I confided with my primary care physician and was like, um, I didn't tell him a whole lot of details, but I told him, a little bit about what happened, and so he tested me, and I remember waiting for that test and thinking, oh my gosh, like wonder if this comes back positive,
Yeah, that's terrifying. Just thinking, what would
yeah.
the results be?
Exactly, exactly. And it was all going through, I was in college at the time, so it was all going through my parents' insurance.
Hmm.
So I ended up, just telling my mom, not telling her that I was raped, at that time because I was still confused about the whole thing. But once again, acting like the victim, I told her I made a mistake and now I have to get tested for HIV. Um, and so, once again, that just kind of looking back, it was like I was seeing it as my fault,
Hmm.
by telling her that I made the mistake. But luckily, that test came back negative, and I eventually did end up testing positive for mono. So, so luckily, I felt relieved with that, and I kind of went along my life, but I I became distant with my friends. I became a little withdrawn. I did get involved in a relationship with somebody else, um, probably a couple months after the rape. But I kept him at a distance too.
Hmm.
And
Just
even though this,
completely lose trust when that happens.
yeah, and that's what happened. I kept him at a distance, and he knew it, and he couldn't understand why, and he kept, trying to talk to me like, why won't you let me in? Why won't you, trust me, even though we were in a committed relationship. And I just, kept him at arm's length. And I think part of the reason too why I got involved in that relationship was I was also trying to distance myself from my rapist.
Hmm.
I was hoping that if he knew I was involved with another man, that he would leave me alone. And he did. We kind of drifted apart. But then, once the other relationship ended, um, you know, um, my rapist found out, and he started reaching out again. And at that point, I'm still confused about everything. I'm still like, well, I don't even know if I was really raped or not. So I let him back into my life. But once again, really, really tried to keep him at a bit of a distance. And then it was probably a little over a year after it had happened. Um, it was during the summer, and we were both home for the summer, and I was invited to a party that he was at, and we ended up, well, he brought me into a room alone, and we started talking, and somehow the subject of what happened the year before was brought up. And you know I he said something, to make me think that he remembered what had happened. And so I stopped, and I was like, well, wait, I thought, you don't remember anything. I thought you told me that you didn't remember anything either. And he's like, well, no, I lied. And I was like, well, why did you lie? If, like, why would you tell me that you didn't remember anything when you remembered everything? And I'm thinking, what is he saying here? And then he said to me, I didn't want you to be angry with me. And at that point, I was kind of like, well, was he just admitting something there?
Hmm.
Like, why would I be angry with you unless something happened, unless you did something wrong, you
Yeah.
know? So at that point, like I kind of felt like my head was going to explode, because everything that I thought was true up until that point, was, you know, I was realizing that it wasn't true. And so I ran out of the room and ran out of the house. And one of my close friends came running out after me, and she was like, "What's wrong?" And I was hysterical and I couldn't even talk. I was just crying and just hysterical. And she's like, "I'm bringing you home." And she kept asking me on the way home, what's going on? You need to talk to me. You need to talk to someone about this. And I was like, I just don't even know what to say. I don't know what to say. Um, and once again, I still don't have my memory back. So I'm like, you know, was this a thing where, I did end up changing my mind? And then, he thought afterwards I was going to be upset with him because I originally said no, and then I changed my mind, and then he thought I was going to change my mind again. So, once again, I was trying to defend him,
Yeah.
you know, through it. And it all came back to the fact that I just couldn't remember. And then it was probably about 8 months later. I was in a class, and it was a psychology of deviance class, and we were talking about rape. And he introduced, this is going to be the subject for the next couple of classes. And he goes, okay, he's like, I want anyone in this room to raise their hand if they know anyone who's ever been raped. And my hand shot up. And as soon as it shot up, I'm thinking, why am I raising my hand? I don't know anyone who's been raped. And then I was like, just thinking, what is going on? And then all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I'm raising my hand because of me.
Hmm.
And it was shortly after that, the memories started coming back, and I started getting a lot of flashbacks. The traditional kind of PTSD thing, something would trigger it, and it'd be, middle of the day, and I get a flashback. Um, uh, at night, I'd have nightmares about it, and slowly pieces of the puzzle started coming back. And it got to the point where I, remembered pretty much everything from that night. Um, there's just one snippet of time, even up to this day, that I don't quite remember.
Hmm.
But it's probably seconds. But, and that snippet of time is from when I told him I didn't want to have sex, and he acknowledged it, and then he kissed me. And then that the next few seconds I can never remember, but the next thing I remember is being on the bed with him, because we were sitting on the edge of the bed at the time when I told him, what I didn't want to do, that I didn't want to have sex. But then somehow we were laying on the bed. So that snippet of time I still don't remember. But then from there on, I remember everything. And at first it was just, kissing, which was fine with me, but then it slowly started escalating, and it, got to the point where, I was like, well, no, I don't want to go this far. And he was on top of me, and I was trying to push him off. And I remember this, like now I remember all of it, and really trying to struggle. And I remember, it hurting a lot, and really trying to, with all my strength, trying to push him off, and then realizing that he was too strong for me. And so then I gave up. And I remember looking up at the ceiling and, thinking, okay, it's, futile to continue struggling, because it's not getting anywhere. Maybe if I don't struggle, it won't hurt as much. And as I was looking up at the ceiling, it was almost like I had a dissociative state. I felt outside of my body, and I felt like I was up on the ceiling watching it as it was continuing. And so, it was like I was watching the whole thing, go on, but I wasn't in my body. I wasn't in control. I was just, it was like a movie I was watching. And then once it was over, then, he started, slowly kind of coming off of me. And that's when I was able to push him off and run out. So, and, once all those memories came back, I realized, it wasn't the alcohol. I was not drunk.
So it took about 2 years for those memories to come back.
Yeah, it took yeah, 2 years.
What are some of these symptoms of PTSD that people can look for?
So one of the main symptoms are actually flashbacks, which you have no control over, where something may trigger it. Um, y- y- PTSD was first described in after soldiers came back from war,
Yeah.
and so maybe like a loud noise would trigger it, and they would have a flashback, like they were back in that situation in war. And sometimes they would actually, they actually would act out or like talk or act like they were, in that setting in war at that time.
Okay.
And then, over time, we realized that, well, it's not just, soldiers coming back from war. It's when anybody goes through a traumatic event, um, especially if, they've repressed, memories and repressed, some of the memories around the event. These memories will come back to them, if there's some kind of trigger that reminds them of that situation.
Okay, yeah. I remember reading something and they changed the name of it like 6 times. The original name was Shell Shock, and
Yeah.
then they changed it like 4 or 5 other times, and now it's PTSD.
Yeah, and I think they changed it because they realized you can apply it to all these other situations, not just to war.
Yeah, any type of trauma.
Exactly. Exactly. So, yeah, and so I mean, that was just a whole new experience for me because it was like, all these flashes of what happened were coming back to me, and it was the first time I was remembering them, and it was like I was there again, experiencing it. And it was just very overwhelming, and I would never know what would trigger it and when it would come. And eventually what ended up happening, I talked to one of my friends who was an RA at my college, a resident assistant, and she actually recommended that I talk to RD, a resident director, who actually, I guess, was specializing in this. So I went to see her, and she kind of got me on the road to recovery. She helped me really realize that, and that I wasn't a victim, but I was a survivor. And once I started kind of changing my mindset around that, and really truly seeing myself as a survivor instead of a victim, um, things really started changing for me. But the problem is that in the beginning, it's hard to change that mindset
Oh,
because,
definitely.
yeah,
Mindset
I mean, you
applies
definitely.
to so many things. Like without a good mindset in like business and
Mhm.
rape, different things, it's just very hard. So it's important to have that person there that can help you through it.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, you know, once it was drilled into my head enough, that,
Hmm.
look, you're a survivor, not a victim. I started being able to deal with things, and I was able to acknowledge, what happened, and kind of heal from it. And, it took a lot. It took years of therapy after that. Once I left college, I continued therapy. I actually saw somebody at the YWCA in Connecticut. And she helped me too, and she actually taught me some self-defense moves, which helped me too, because I felt a little bit more empowered that if this should
Hmm.
happen again, there's something I can physically do to try to get myself out of that situation.
Yeah, it was very brave of you to speak up so soon because so many survivors wait so long. Like myself, it took me 10 years to say anything to my parents.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I told my father for the first time a couple months ago, and this has been 20 years ago that this happened.
Yeah. How did it feel when you told him?
Um, it felt good. It felt empowering. And I had held back for so long, um, telling him. I told my mom probably 8 or so years after it happened. But she was concerned about how my dad might react to it.
Mm-hmm.
So, I felt that, yeah, I should keep it from him, because I didn't want to upset him.
Mm-hmm.
But then once I told him, he was so supportive, and I think he's been one of the most supportive people in my life. Um, out of the people I've told, I feel like has shown me the most support,
Mm-hmm.
and that that has really helped, give me the courage to, speak out about this,
Yeah.
and try to help other people
Yeah,
heal as well.
it makes sense on like being afraid of how they'll react because there's been some cases like where the father ended up going out and shooting the person, and that definitely will scare a survivor into like sharing it with their parents. Whereas my dad was the same. He's very supportive, and at first he was like, "Oh, I want to kill him," and I'm like, "No, you're not.
No, you're not.
You're not gonna do that."
Well, and it's tough too, because I've gotten all sorts of reactions. I mean, I've had people close to me where I felt that they would support me, not believe me,
Hmm.
or imply that I'm lying about it. And but then I've had people be very supportive of it. One of my friends, from my hometown, it took me a while to tell her as well, because she knew him, and I thought she wasn't going to believe me. And once I told
Hmm.
her, right away, she said, "I believe you." And that
That's
just felt
awesome.
amazing. Yeah, I felt
Hmm.
amazing.
It feels like when I told my parents, it felt like a boulder was lifted off my shoulders. And then the
Yeah,
more that I talk to people like yourself or people in other formats, definitely helps.
agreed. And I feel like the more open communication I have about it, not only does it help me, but I feel like I can help other people too.
Hmm. Definitely. There's this, I don't know if you've heard of this app. It's for iPhone only. It's in beta right now, but it's called Clubhouse and it's an audio only chat room.
Oh, okay. No,
And
I never heard of
it's
it.
invite only right now. But I started a room in there just last Tuesday just to have people come in and like share their stories, and people will feel a lot safer because first of all, none of it's recorded, so people can say whatever they want and it's not going to leave the room unless someone
Right.
wants to be a piece of shit and record it without anyone knowing. Um, but yeah, we had like probably 100 people join the room last Tuesday on it,
Wow.
and there's at least 4 or 5 people who was the first time they ever shared their stories. It
Wow.
just felt so great. Like during it, I was messaging some of the people helping me co-host it, and they're like, "Wow, this is awesome."
Mhm.
It's just so powerful, like sharing your stories, how it can make people feel so comfortable about it.
It is. And I feel like the more you don't talk about it, the
The worse
worse
it
it is.
gets. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely.
Because
Definitely. Like
that's
festers.
because that's like why a lot of people in towns or like the Catholic Church is a big one,
Hmm.
that covers it up because they're afraid they might look people look make they don't want to speak up because they're afraid it's going to make them look bad, or sometimes they're like, oh well, we know this person, they want to do such a thing.
Exactly.
And that just
Exactly.
makes people more scared of speaking up.
Yeah, and I mean, I felt that, the person who did this to me, I felt he was very well liked, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking, no one's going to believe me, that this happened. And plus there was a lot of self-blame along with it,
Mm-hmm.
like I put myself in that situation. I shouldn't have been drinking and put myself in a situation where I couldn't defend myself, and then, it's my fault that I repressed the memories and, couldn't remember, it was all my fault.
Yeah, and it's very common that we do that. I did that as well, but I was like, wait a second, I was only 12, and they were 14, but I was like, I was only 12, and my therapist was like, Nick, hindsight is not 2020. You didn't know what was happening, and you were only a certain age.
Exactly, exactly. And even, when it happened to me, I mean, I was older, and it was like I knew better, but yet being in that situation, it's just completely different when you're actually in that situation.
Because your body and your mind's like acting on automatic, and you have little control over it. What is it, like
Exactly.
fight, flight, and I think there's a third one.
Yeah, well, fight or flight. So either, you want to, fight it and, be, I guess, be kind of
Fight, fight, or flee, or freeze. That's what it
oh,
was.
freeze. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Is there anything you're doing now to advocate that you'd like to share?
Um, so at this point, I just started speaking out. I actually
Nice.
2 years ago, I decided to apply to be a member of the RAINN Speakers Bureau.
Hmm.
And so actually, this is the first time that I'm actually kind of publicly speaking.
Oh,
I
nice.
had plans actually last year. I wanted to speak at colleges,
Hmm.
but COVID kind of got in the way of that,
Oh, I
unfortunately.
remember. Well, you're
So,
very strong and courageous for doing it, so thank you.
well, thank you for having me.
Is there any last words you'd like to have?
I think I think, the last thing I would, just like to reiterate is if, anyone finds themselves in this situation, that the best advice, I can give is, talk about it. It doesn't have to be public, it can be, someone trusted. It could be a family member, a friend, it could be professional, a counselor. But that's the only way to really heal from this. And the sooner you talk about it, the sooner you'll be able to heal from it and move on.
100%. You can even join groups on Facebook, and if you don't want to use your name, you can just make a fake profile and share it.
Yeah,
Anything helps.
right.
Alrighty, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.
However, that's done.